Tap in, tap in. Tell your grandmama, tell a friend. Tap in. Business, music, smarter finance. Bound to win. Tap in. Business, music, finance. If you trying to win. Welcome back, guys. This is Business Music Finance, the show that gives you the game you need to know, intelligent topics, no drama, no gossip. Today we're going to talk about law, as law is very important, and I feel an important topic is one that you can learn about year over year and will be important decades from now. Today we have a lawyer in front of us who will specifically talk about what type of law he practices. He has defended many and been successful with defending the individuals that have employed him. He has been on CNN, and if you are familiar with the Austin area, you will remember the I can't believe it's not yogurt murders. So with that said, I want to thank my guest, Mr. James Sawyer, for sitting down with us today. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
How are you doing today?
It's a Friday, so obviously I'm somewhat cheerful. The weekend is coming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I can almost feel the golf club swinging.
Awesome. And before we get started, for those who are interested in using your services, how can individuals get a hold of you?
It's easy. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. You just look up James Sawyer. My number's listed. My address is listed. Any lawyer who does an active trial practice obviously makes himself available to the public so that anyone can reach him.
Wonderful. And so doing some research, I learned about real estate lawyers. I learned about merger and acquisition lawyers. I learned about litigation. So with that said, what type of law do you specifically practice?
I only do one thing. It's criminal defense work.
Okay.
If you've been charged or a family member's been charged with a criminal offense, then my job is defending you, representing you in court.
And when it comes to criminal defense, did you start out as a public defender, or did you just go straight to?
No, I actually was helped by the man who later became the dean of my law school at UT into a very prestigious job that bored me to death. Did it involve lots of money? Yes. It was about as interesting as working in an accounting shop. I got bored. I was going to quit being a lawyer. I was fortunate in getting appointed, or rather one of my senior partners was appointed to represent one of 16 defendants in a large heroin case where the heroin had been moved from Barstow, California to Fort Worth, Texas. And I was absolutely intrigued by it. I succeeded in getting my client dismissed and found something that absolutely fascinated me.
Now, for those who may not know, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be considered a federal case?
Oh, that was a federal case, yes, in front of Judge Eldon Mahon.
Now, for individuals who are unaware, could you explain the difference between a state case and a federal case?
The difference between a state case and a federal case is that the feds very rarely do sloppy investigations, very rarely make mistakes. You get named as a defendant in federal court, the chances are overwhelming that you're going to do some time. And the real challenge for your lawyer 99% of the time is trying to negotiate a plea that the client can live with.
So I think you've already told us this answer, but I need to ask you anyway. What motivates you every day as a lawyer to get up and go defend individuals that have been charged with crimes?
The sheer challenge of what you do every day. No two cases are exactly alike. No two prosecutors are alike. And remember that the state's charging you because they want to convict you. And the challenge is to take that and say, no, you're not going to get it done.
Wonderful. Now, for those who are interested in becoming a lawyer, what are a few things you'd recommend these individuals have or know how to do?
You know, that's really a tough question because the law encompasses so very much. Mm-hmm. You might work for a firm that has never seen a courthouse in 50 years and do all in-house work as a lawyer. On the other hand, you may decide you want to become a trial lawyer and deliberately go to work for maybe a civil firm that does personal injury law, that does commercial law. Those guys do go to court, but they don't really engage in shootouts, and there are no dead bodies. Or you may gravitate toward what a lot of lawyers don't like, and that's criminal law. But if a challenge really fascinates you, criminal law will reach out and grab you by the neck.
So criminal law, you would say, outside of being a federal criminal defense lawyer, criminal law is probably one of the hardest because you have to do research and it's not just the same paperwork you're looking at every day?
No, it's not. Every case really and truly is different. The arguments differ. There's a big difference between federal criminal defense work and state criminal defense work, and the best lawyers do both.
Agreed. Now, I hope this isn't taking away from you feeding your family, but what are a few things that you would recommend individuals do to not incriminate themselves in front of the police?
The first thing to do really is remember that the Fifth Amendment gives you the absolute privilege to refuse to answer any question. Anytime that you think you're at risk, that law enforcement is coming up asking you questions that could incriminate you, result in you being in trouble, you simply say, I refuse to answer the question. That invokes the Fifth Amendment. They can no longer question you.
That is true, and I think a lot of people don't know their rights or don't really understand what is protected under the Constitution and the amendments. I was looking at a reid, R-E-I-D program while doing research for this interview, and that is a program where police are taught how to legally...
How to interrogate, yes.
How to interrogate.
And the reid technique has been around since the mid to late 40s. It's still used today. Police stations all over America, police academies rather, use the reid technique to teach would-be officers how to interrogate. And the problem with the reid technique you can find in the reid manual itself. And remember, this is Reid talking to you through his manual. He was a psychologist. And in the technique, there comes a step when the manual says, at this point, be very sure that the person you're questioning is guilty because you are going to get a confession. Now, that's pretty damning. That means that the reid technique itself recognizes there can be false confessions.
When there are false confessions, that is a avenue that a good lawyer can take to potentially reduce or acquit.
Once there's a confession in hand, you have entered a different world. It becomes increasingly difficult to challenge the confession. Remember, you challenge the confession, you may have a prosecutor look at you and say, I'm raising the offer to 20 from 10.
Wow.
There's really no wow to it. It's part of the dynamic, and it's scary, and it's not for amateurs. It's not for people who are faint of heart. Criminal law is very, very demanding.
And it sounds like using your Fifth Amendment to not say anything can prevent you from providing a false confession.
It means that you put the burden purely on the back of the state. It's the United States Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, that recognizes you have no obligation to do anything other than protect yourself, and that's to say, I will not answer any question. Or to say, I will not answer any question without the advice and assistance of counsel.
One of the things looking into law that I found out is that basically the prosecutor and the criminal defense attorney are basically arguing burden of proof. Could you explain what burden of proof is?
The burden of proof is on the state or the United States. The accuser bears the burden of proving to the jury that, in fact, the accused is guilty. And the jury is so instructed. They're told the burden is on the state of Texas, or the burden is on the United States of America to bring evidence of such quality that it leaves you with no doubt about the defendant's guilt.
Now, Texas is a very interesting state because Austin would be considered very liberal. I am not really into politics. I do believe it is two sides of the same coin, but I respect and understand that politics has been in this country for a very long time. When it comes to picking a jury, how do you make sure that your clients, when you have to go to trial, get a fair jury?
Over the course of my career, I've tried more than 250 felonies to jury verdict. I've probably tried more cases than almost any lawyer I know. But I love trial work, and that differentiates me and others in a way. And the prosecutor's job is to try and convict you at trial or persuade you to plead guilty as a result of plea bargaining. As I said, it's a challenge, and you just have to be up for it. You have to be prepared. You have to know the facts. You have to know why your client has a defense that could be presented to a jury.
Now, a lot of individuals have heard the terms, you don't want to go to court. They've also heard the news that the feds usually have a 99 or 98% win rate. So as my lawyer, based on, let's say, a certain felony charge, would you recommend not going to trial, settling before, or does it all depend on the county and the prosecutor? And
let's back up and remember one thing. The decision is made by the client. Your burden is to give the client all available information. If the client asks your opinion, you give him your opinion and you state the reasons why it's your opinion. But in the end, your client decides whether he or she is going to plead guilty, whether or not a trial is going to obtain. And you are bound by your client's decisions. I really do despise lawyers who think that they are going to persuade their clients to plead guilty. Is it an easier way to stick the fee in your pocket? Yeah. Do I think it's morally acceptable? No.
Understood. And I respect that, because you hear a lot about how public defenders have so many cases that a lot of times some of their clients just plead guilty based out of not believing in the individual that the state has given them. But I can also understand from a business perspective, if someone's got 50 cases and the background of one individual, it may not look good. It may make sense for this person in that specific scenario to plead guilty versus trying to go to trial and tack on more.
And that may well be true, but it's the client's decision, and that's what you really have to be certain is happening. Present all the facts. Give your opinion, but remind the client he or she makes the ultimate decision, period. And I tell my clients, you decide you want to go to trial, we're going to trial.
Now, speaking of trial, one of the things that this show talks about also is finances. I think financing is very important. I think that when individuals break the law or make a mistake, it can be very costly. And different level of charges cost, as you know, a certain range versus a possession or a misdemeanor or a DWI or a murder or a robbery. They all come with a different cost, some high, some low. Is there something that dictates that?
Well, the facts. Look, if you have a serious felony count, the time that the lawyer is going to spend involved in that case, investigating the facts, forming his opinion, it can be exhaustive, depending on what the accusation is. And yeah, you have to support your family. You have to keep your office open. So yeah, it can become extremely expensive to retain a lawyer and get effective representation, depending on what the accusation is.
And once again, I'm someone who...
But remember, if you can't afford a lawyer, you simply tell the court, I can't afford a lawyer, and under our law, you will get a lawyer appointed. It may be you can't afford, for example, to retain an expert.
Yeah.
The court, the state, is obliged to pay for the expert to come in and assist you.
I can understand what you're saying, but I think you would believe, and many do believe, that if you don't have the money to be able to combat some of the crimes, you could be in very serious trouble in terms of the type of consequence that they could give you, which is why I tell people you shouldn't be doing crimes if you're broke, because you don't understand how the state can tack on a lot of charges. And if you already have priors and you don't have the amount of money to pay a lawyer like Mr. Sawyer to get you out of trouble, you could be looking at some time or having to work with the state.
I think the most unfair truth about criminal law in the United States is that the burden, the accusations fall disproportionately on the poor. But it's the poor who are more likely to commit crimes than not. If you're rich, if you're living a great life, if you're able to support your family, if you're driving a nice automobile, why in God's name would you break the law? Maybe in a fit of temper, you might kill someone in the middle of an argument. But by and large, the more money you've got, the more insulated you are from the chance that you're going to face any kind of a criminal charge during your life.
I would definitely agree with you. I think when I was growing up, I was definitely a knucklehead because I didn't know what I know now. And now just thinking about some of the things that me and my friends did when we were younger, it's crazy to think that we would ever go through that now, knowing, how much trouble you could get into by doing something silly or stupid. And so you talked about how you need experts when you get in these very large cases, very large felonies charged by the state police. What's the longest case you've worked on?
Oh, Lord. One of the longest for sure was the yogurt shop murders.
I was going to get into that later, but we can get into that. I
probably got, more than 10 years of my life tied up in that case.
Now, to talk about that case, if you guys aren't aware, 4 girls, correct? 4
little girls were raped, murdered, i.e. shot, and burned in the yogurt shop. The yogurt shop was set on fire after they were killed, after they were raped.
And this was December 6, 1991?
Yes.
How was the technology back then in terms of what we have now? Was there DNA, fingerprints?
This case, I think, was haunted not so much by technology or the lack of it. It was the mistakes that were made during the preliminary investigation. When the firemen arrived, for example, because it was initially called in as a fire, no one knew there were 4 little girls in there that were dead. People saw the flames. The fire department came, the first responders. They're knocking down the fire, and then they see the first little body lying there on the floor and realize it's a crime scene. The greatest mistake, in my opinion, that was made is that the firemen, using their hoses, basically blew everything that was on the floor out of the back door. They had pictures of it. Then they sacked up everything that had been blown out by the fire hoses. They took pictures of it. There were more than 12 garbage bags. Now, you could call it garbage, but there are many of us who would say it's evidence. God knows what was blown out those back doors. There may have been DNA. There may have been fingerprints. We don't know and will never know because they hauled the bags to the city garbage dump and dumped them. About 2 days later, they realized, oh, my God, did we throw evidence away? They went out and searched for them, and they never found them. The result was there was only one piece of physical evidence, one piece of evidence out of that trial. It came out of Amy Ayer's vagina. It was the male DNA for one man, and it's called YSTR. One half of your DNA comes from your mother, one half comes from your father. The YSTR is the male contribution. They had a YSTR sample out of Amy that became the sole and only physical evidence.
And so, just to give people a brief summary, was there 1 or 2 young boys that were charged with this crime?
4 were suspected. 2 are actually charged, Mike Scott and Robert Springsteen, and that's because they both confessed.
Now, was this a confession made without counsel?
It was a confession made without counsel. But if you agree to speak to the police, you have waived your right to have a lawyer present.
So if those individuals that said, I don't feel comfortable speaking with you without counsel, then
it would have been over. But it can be really damning. As you know, if you have become familiar with the reid technique, Robert Springsteen's confession could be a model for what goes wrong with the reid technique. And Robert knew he was going to go to death row when they were playing the videotape confession to the jury. You could see the jury's faces hardening as they listened to Robert confessing. And then the very last lines of his confession, the defendant says, "That's not enough, Robert. Tell us what you did. What's the last thing you did to Amy?" And he said, "Okay, I put my dick in her pussy and I fucked her." When that played to the jury, when they heard that line, I'll never forget, Robert leaned over to me and said, "I'm going to death row, aren't I?" And I said, "Yes, Robert, you are."
Now, did he eventually go to death row?
Oh, he spent 2 years on death row before I got it reversed. And then he was in prison longer until I proved to a scientific certainty he could not have raped Amy Ayers, that it was not his DNA, and that's what set him free.
Now, has there been any update to that case in terms of new suspects, or is that a cold case?
Again, no. I'm not the one to answer that because I am not in a position to know if there is an ongoing investigation, if further efforts are being made. That would be a question for the police.
Understood. Now, that sounds like to me, based on the research that I did on that case, sounds like it was a life-changing event for these individuals because they were young boys at the time, correct?
It was a life-changing event for almost everyone who had any contact with that case at all. That includes the investigators, the police, the firefighters, the lawyers. Again, damn it, the facts were so ugly, and then you have these confessions, and yeah, there were people who invested themselves in believing those confessions were true, that they were damning, and that they should send those boys to death row.
And how much time did they do in between 1991 and when they were able to be released?
I think Robert did a total of 7 years. I don't know how long Mike Scott was in prison.
Okay.
And part of Robert's time, as you remember, was on death row.
Yes. And while you have a client on death row that you believe is innocent and you have a family and you have other cases, how do you find the time and the will to say, I'm going to make sure that I finish what I started and get this individual out?
As I said, criminal law presents its own challenges. And yeah, you may have multiple cases pending at the same time. Each of them deserves your attention, your professionalism. And if you can't do that, then damn it, you ought not be practicing criminal law. You take each case individually and you work it, and you discharge your obligation to your client.
Now, when I go to work and I have my GM there, it's a very different feeling than when my boss is there, when his boss is there. So when you're dealing with a case like this that is national news, are there different things that happen? Do prosecutors come up to you and tell you, I'm not making deal this time? Is there more cameras or more spotlight on this case that heightens how the jury sees things?
As I said, really, every case is different. And the dialogue you're going to have with your prosecutor depends on the facts in that particular case. If I have 3 prior bank robberies and I'm accused of bank robbery and they have a videotape of me holding a gun, the chances are overwhelming I'm going back to prison. And the only question is for how long.
When it comes to this specific type of case that you represented your clients in terms of the murders, how much would that usually cost someone? Ballpark, since you said it did take a very long time.
Pardon me. I think it would be very, very, very rare that anyone in Robert Springsteen's position could actually afford to hire a lawyer. Between the lawyers, the experts, you are literally talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And that's very scary to know that what I'm being accused of would cost me 6 figures or more to have someone represent me. And I do believe lack of money with someone who isn't educated or comes from a poor community can lead to people just saying, I'll sign the first deal that gets thrown at me.
Again, I think the burden is on the defense attorney. You're entitled to have a lawyer appointed. You're entitled to have experts. You are entitled to a full and thorough defense in the presence of a jury and a judge. And again, I think really the system works every year to improve its ability to provide proper representation to the accused.
Understood. I think you would agree when I say that sometimes one crime or the same crime in one county can cost you more in a different county.
Oh, yeah, but that's going to be true. I mean, I don't think there's anything unusual about that. I think there are counties where you're going to be knee-deep in Republicans who believe that prison is made for people who break the law. You may be in a county where people are much more, let's say, well-educated and whose approach to punishment is different, who believe that rehabilitation may be the most important function that we can offer the accused, that we help people change their lives instead of just punishing them.
Mm-hmm. One thing, and you probably have done cases in Williamson County, one thing that I respect about Williamson County is that if you get in trouble, no matter what you look like, who you are, or who you're related to, you're going to get the same type of punishment. Yeah, they hold no bars. They don't lean towards helping out individuals just because of who they may be.
I think the strength of a county like Williamson County is treating everyone the same. Yes.
What would you recommend to individuals who come to a state like Texas and may go to small counties where their bread and butter is taking a petty crime that you may believe shouldn't come with a harsh punishment and then really taxing those individuals?
My advice seriously is don't break the law. Then it doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter whether you live in Harris County, Dallas County, Bexar County, South Texas. Just obey the law.
And this is coming from a lawyer, guys. So when a lawyer tells you to not break the law, I would definitely listen. You could save yourself a lot of money. Now,
you can save yourself a lot of years of your life.
There you go.
Once you begin spending time behind bars, it becomes a lot easier for a jury to re-sentence you to time behind bars because they think, once they learn you've already been in jail, that you had the opportunity to change your life and that the statement you're making is, I'm not going to change.
I would agree. I have this theory where, let's say you get in trouble in 2024 and it takes you 2 years to get off probation or wherever you're on. That means that it took you 2 years to go back to the same spot you were at before you got in trouble, which means in reality, it's going to take you another 2 years to get back where you would have been. So you've really just lost 2 years of your life where you could have been able to develop something or move forward. With that said, what's the difference in terms of, I guess, cost when it comes to a state versus a federal case?
I think most defense lawyers would agree with me that the federal case is going to be more expensive, much more difficult to defend, and you'd better have some depth of experience before you take that kind of a case. Federal court is just a different, it's a different experience, and it requires some depth of knowledge and some experience on the part of the defense lawyer.
Is it true in a federal case the jury can see you and the prosecutors have their back to the jury?
I don't know where that came from. I hear that. Look, lawyers interact with the jury. Prosecutors interact with the jury. When we're examining witnesses on the stand, we'll ask the question to the witness and then look at the jury to see how they respond to the answer. It's part of the way that you carry out your examination of a witness. If you're only looking at the witness, how in God's name do you know what the jury's thinking, how they're reacting? No, there's a real dynamic at work there, and you learn how to look at the actors.
A little bit of salesmanship. You should always look in the eye of the individual you're interacting with. When it comes to the case with the heroin that was transported from California to Texas, you said that there were 16 defendants. Is that correct?
There were.
How many lawyers were working on that case?
16 of us. Each defendant is entitled to have his own lawyer. You can't ethically represent two people accused in the same case. What do you do if the prosecution says, hey, Sawyer, tell you what, tell Abel to turn against Smith and we'll give Abel a deal? Now, how in God's name, you have just put yourself in an impossible position. If you don't tell your client he has the deal, you're damned. But if you do tell him, he has the ability to betray your other client. You can't do it. You represent one client, and you give him all of your attention and all of your loyalty.
So I just have to think off the top of my head, Jim, that one of those 16 lawyers probably got a deal for his client.
Oh, sure.
And that deal may involve that client turning on one of the other 15.
Of course he did.
How does that work as a lawyer when you know there are 15 other individuals you're working with where one of your clients basically going to put
You're not working with anyone but your client.
Okay, so you guys didn't work together.
You may cooperate as much as you can, but you only have one loyalty and one obligation, and that's the client that you're representing.
Understood. Would you say that's the case that set you apart and started getting you high-level business, high-level cases? Or is there another case?
No, it was a very interesting experience. For me, it told me that I really wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer. I didn't want to be doing other things. It was a life-changing experience for me. But every lawyer has his own outlook, his own or her own set of values. I mean, we're different. We're all different.
Thank you for that. I believe that as we get older, we start listening more. That's why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Is there any advice from your mentor that you took and that you still have and you still use today and maybe you pass on to other young lawyers that helped you in your career?
When I was a really young lawyer, John Brady, I was a young lawyer in Fort Worth, and John Brady was one of the most well-known defense lawyers. And he was what we called back then a country lawyer. I mean, he talked like a cowboy, but he was a very, very, very good lawyer. Very, very smart. And I went to him and I remember asking Mr. Brady, what's the best advice you could give me in terms of approaching a career in criminal law? And he leaned back and grinned and he said, Jimmy, I've lied to every woman I've ever known. I lie to my friends to entertain and amuse them. He said, I've never lied in court. It has nothing to do with virtue, son. The first time they catch you lying in a courtroom, you're a liar forever. I took that advice to heart, and that's advice that I give to young lawyers.
Once you lie in the courtroom?
Once they know that you're a liar, you're finished. Why in the hell would they believe you?
That is very good advice, very deep advice. I wanted to run through a specific case because reading it blew me away that you were able to do what you did to the accused. It was a murder and manslaughter charge. The client's sister testified that she helped her brother clean up the murder scene at the house and saw him wrap the dead man's body in a blanket before the body was dumped on a lonely stretch of a public road in Austin. Do you remember that case?
Of course I remember it.
How did you do that? Because I would assume a sister telling a jury that my brother did something is about as guilty as you can.
Except that you wonder why you would wait 9 years to come forward and do it.
Wow.
And then you think, wait a minute, lady, do you have another reason that you're coming forward now to accuse him of something that far in the past? You sat on that knowledge all of these years for what? Because you loved your brother? Why did you stop loving your brother? Oh, are you fighting over property, ma'am? Has someone in the family died? Have you decided that you'd rather inherit all the money than split it with your brother? And so now you remember that, oh my God, he committed this murder. And remember, that was the only evidence of his involvement. No fingerprints, no DNA, no other human being who could in any way support that story. That's how I won.
Now, is there a statute of limitations in terms of when you can report a crime? Because 9 years seems like a very long time.
It seems like a very long time, except that the crime is murder. Are there statutes of limitations? Yes. But murder is always going to be hanging out there.
Really?
Yes, really.
Got it. That's actually a very good point. You talked about waiting 9 years over some land or things like that. There was another case as well where the individual was charged with a sexual assault of a child. The client confessed in writing to sexual assault of a child. The confession was admitted into evidence before the jury. What does that mean, the evidence was admitted?
That the state was allowed to prove that he had confessed. They had his confession. It was in his own writing. They introduced it through one of the detectives, and the jury got to hear the confession, and the confession was given to the jury when they were out deciding guilt or innocence. That's what that means.
Are they supposed to have it before? Or not at all? Or
No, I mean, the confession comes in as part of the presentation of evidence. You know, you have the detective on the stand and you say, Detective Smith, did you speak to Mr. Sawyer's client? I did. Did he do that willingly? Yes. Did you take a videotape of that? Yes. Did he eventually give you a statement in his own handwriting? Yes. I'm going to show you what's been marked as states number 15. Do you recognize this? Oh, yes, sir. This is the statement he gave us in his handwriting. And Judge, I offer this into evidence. You can't object to it. It's your client's handwriting. Judge admits it into evidence, and now the jury can consider it, and that you get to read it to the jury, and they get to hear it.
was that his actual handwriting?
Yes.
It was? And so how was this individual eventually presumed not guilty?
Well, the jury found him not guilty, and I proved that he had given that confession because of the way that they interrogated him, that they intimidated him, that they scared him, and that he could never have done that.
That is wild that police have the ability to do some of these things to get a guilty verdict or to get someone on arrest. When it comes to a case like this or the case before where the woman comes to the police after 9 years and you're accused of something, is there a way to get that money back that you had to spend to prove your innocence? Or is that just...
No. It's money that you spent because you were criminally accused, or money the state spent if they had to appoint a lawyer to represent you.
It's the cost of living and doing business in the United States. Another case: 6 separate felony acts of sexual assault on a child. The child testified to the jury that she was repeatedly sexually assaulted by the accused. Now, before we talk about this case, I assume you are a parent.
I am.
Correct.
Do I have a daughter? I do. Do I adore my daughter? I do.
You know where I'm going, and I think I know the answer, but how do you separate you being a father with you being the lawyer that needs to represent someone that is accused of these heinous crimes?
You don't separate yourself from that. The question is, can you in fact go ahead and represent the accused? You know, one of the things you're not asking me is, do you have a very candid conversation with the accused? If he says he didn't do it, do you form an opinion of whether you believe him or not? Sometimes you can't agree to represent an individual, and you have to tell them, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, sir, I can't represent you. And if he pushes you, you tell him, sir, I don't believe you. When you do, then you will give it everything you've got. In that case where the little girl testified, I took her through a lengthy cross-examination. I got relatives who came and testified that they had caught her having really strange sexual contact with a dog. And in the final argument, I looked at her. She was sitting out there in the courtroom and said, we're never going to know what's wrong with this little girl. And she shot me the finger in front of the jury. So, yes, I mean, those are the things that perhaps a jury considers in finding your client not guilty.
Was there ever a case where you believed your client was innocent and they were found guilty that stuck with you?
There is no lawyer who practices criminal law who has any extensive experience that hasn't known the pain of having a jury return a guilty verdict when you really believe that they're not. Can that happen? Yes. Does it happen? Yes. Sometimes they return the guilty verdict because the state is able to prove how many times they've been to prison. And that alone undermines any chance of them believing your client when he's testifying. Criminal law can be very, very, very punishing.
I saw your face and your emotions, and made me realize that is probably one of the more negative sides of being a criminal defense attorney, when you don't get a win and you thought you would.
It's not a matter of thinking that you'd get the win. It's really the pain that comes with thinking, dear God, did I do everything I could do? Because I believe this man or I believe this woman. And, but again, it's part of what you assume. It's what you take on when you decide you're going to do this work.
Now, when you receive a guilty verdict, is there any steps that can be taken to appeal the decision?
Well, you can appeal any criminal decision. You simply announce your intention to appeal. You file notice of appeal. If they can't afford to hire you for the appeal, you get an appellate lawyer appointed. Our system really is, I think, the best criminal justice system in the world. And no one comes close.
Have you practiced outside of the United States?
No, I have not.
I was once again doing research for this, and I learned that China and North Korea, they have some of the strictest laws in the not the United States, but in the world. And the United States, although we have some strict laws, you at least have a chance here if you have a good lawyer. Versus over there, sometimes good lawyers are punished, so therefore they're not even able to do their job.
I have no argument with your analysis.
So, guys, don't get in trouble in North Korea or China. Don't get in trouble anywhere, right? Don't break the law.
Don't break the law.
Now, do you listen to music?
Do you know any American who doesn't listen to music?
That is a true statement. There are some people who listen to music less, and so one of the things that I think brings people together is music. And so I wanted to ask you, who was the last individual that you saw live?
Oh, golly. Wow. I haven't seen live music in quite some time because the format has changed so much. I used to represent musicians. I represented one of the most creative songwriters this country's ever had. His name was Jerry Lynn Williams. Called himself the Wild Dog from Azle. Only Bob Dylan has a bigger songbook than Jerry Lynn Williams. And it wasn't just listening to songs. It was interacting with the people who made them. I got to meet the Rolling Stones when they were in Dallas through Jerry Lynn.
Really?
Yeah.
That must have been fun.
Hanging out with Jerry Lynn was pure fun. But there came a time, and in fact, it was when I met the Rolling Stones. We went back to their hotel and, we're drinking and partying and laughing. And if you ever see pictures of the Stones, particularly backstage after a performance, you'll see standing behind them a little ways a guy who didn't look the way I do now, gray-haired, suit, tie. He was their manager. He took me aside and said, you don't want to let this become your life. You will not have a family. You won't have children. This is going to be everything you do, and they demand more and more of you. And what you become in the end is a caregiver. And that got to me. And so I really started backing away from representing musicians.
Now, were you his lawyer in terms of intellectual property, or were you just a personal friend, a family lawyer?
You can't represent a musician and say, I was just his attorney. You become pals. It's almost inevitable. And you get stories you can't make up. I remember driving with Jerry in Fort Worth one year, and we were driving down Campbellview Boulevard, and he suddenly pulls over. He had a custom green Cadillac, slams on the brakes. I said, what in the hell are you doing? He said, just stand here, stay here. And he rushes, and I realized we're in front of a pawn shop. And I thought, what? And he comes out grinning ear to ear. These guys are so different. Opens the back door, and he throws in an accordion. Gets in, and I said, I didn't know you could play an accordion. And he said, I can't yet. Yeah.
Who is your favorite artist?
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I listen to an array of music.
No, I listen to an array of music, but probably Bob Dylan.
He went to Texas State. That's where I graduated from. Eat 'em up. And just to confirm, where did you graduate from? I guess undergrad first.
The University of Texas.
At Austin?
At Austin.
Okay. And so you're diehard burnt orange?
Yeah, I am a burnt orange guy, and I went to law school at the university as well. And really, I think sometimes when I speak, I tell people, I believe America really is a wonderful country. My last name now is Sawyer. When we were naturalized as American citizens, my name was changed from Losoya, which is my birth name, and they anglicized it to Sawyer. My father was born in San Luis Potosi. My dad and his family walked across the Texas border when it was unregulated. They settled in San Antonio. In World War II, my father, who was a Mexican national and promised absolutely nothing, joined the American Army to fight in World War II. He met my mother, who is English, while waiting for D-Day in 1944. And thank God he got her pregnant with me. I was born in January of 45. He came back and only saw me one time and got my mom pregnant with my brother Michael. But he never abandoned us. About 3 years later, we came over on the USS Marine Falcon to the United States, came through Ellis Island, and took the train from New York to Chicago, Chicago to San Antonio, and we were reunited as a family.
Wow.
Well, no, I think the real wow is that Mike and I came here. We became naturalized Americans. We're both lawyers.
That's awesome. I said wow because you do not look 79. I was doing the math.
Thank you. Hey, you did the right. You did the right arithmetic.
That's awesome. And so it sounds like you're a very proud Hispanic national. Would that be the correct terminology to use?
There's no question that I am proud to be Hispanic. And when they changed our names, that was one of the more difficult things. I realized today it was meant to be a good thing, to help you be able to blend in to the larger society. But, my relatives are still, Martinez and Losoya. But yeah, I'm intensely proud to be an American. I wore the Green Beret for 3 years. I'm a paratrooper.
Thank you for your service.
No, it's what Americans owe their country. My brother Mike was a Marine, so.
Is it difficult to take on challenges when you represent Hispanic defendants who you feel may have been charged at an unnecessary amount of crimes because of the color of their skin and their background? Or do you say
one of the weaknesses in our system is that if you're black, brown, can the system be kind of even inadvertently loaded against you? Yes. But can you cure that? Can you address it? Can you make for change in representing your client? Yes. This is the best criminal justice system in the world, and we should do all we can to keep it the way it is, defend it.
Thank you. Now, I don't want to get too much into your pockets, but I do think that there are certain industries that no matter what will be lucrative and we'll need. For example, we'll always need doctors because of health. We'll always need bankers because we have to put our money somewhere. And technology is ever growing, so we'll always need engineers of such. And we're always going to need lawyers because the law is ever changing, and we're always improving laws that were put in place that may not be right. One of the things that I discovered was Virginia v. Lovings. Are you familiar with the case?
Everyone knows Virginia versus Loving, yes.
Okay. If you're unfamiliar, Virginia v. Lovings is a case, or is the case, that allowed interracial marriage to happen in the United States of America. And ironically, it was an Anglo-Saxon man or a Caucasian man who went to prison who really got this conversation jump-started and the law changed. So when it comes to that case, and I know you probably know more than me, how was it that the appellate courts were able to state that the original verdict was unconstitutional?
Because it was based on racism. And racism is not allowed under our Constitution. In fact, we're protected from it. We are treated as individuals, not judged by the color of our skin.
No, but an individual believes that they are being accused of a crime based on their race. Is there anything that they can do, or is that just a civil rights lawyer has to get involved at that?
No. Look, at the very least, forget all the other arguments you can make. You're allowed to be on a stand in front of a jury in an open courtroom in the presence of journalists, cameras, TVs, and say, I believe I'm sitting here because I'm black. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I'm not guilty. You know, you just tell the truth. Say it out loud. Say it publicly.
Tell the truth and say it publicly. I want to thank you for your time. We're going to wrap up, but can you give us 3 songs that you would recommend someone listen to sooner than later?
Johnny Cash, Give My Love to Rose. Anything by Bob Dylan, and I mean that the way I'm saying it. Anything by the Beatles.
All right, that is our show. Once again, I want to thank Mr. James Sawyer for coming in. Once again, if anybody wants to reach you, they can call your office or go online, correct?
Either one.
Either one. How busy are you these days with cases? I mean,
How busy are we, Felicia?
Super busy, right? It took me forever to get this individual, so I hope you guys really appreciate this episode. He was in a different county a couple weeks ago, making sure his defendants were being represented correctly. So once again, this is Business Music Finance, the show that gives you the game you need to know. Intelligent topics, no drama, no gossip. We'll see you soon. Take care.